This is section 1.5, which is all about linear equations, functions, zeros, and applications. So basically it's word problems. And hopefully the math isn't anything that's going to highly offend you. The most important thing on these is being able to pull from the problem what you need in order to set up an equation. So I'm going to show you 4 different problem types, and then I'm going to have you try some so that you see all the different things that might show up in your homework. Okay, so the first one is talking about studying abroad. It says in the 2012-2013 school year, 47,058 U.S. students studied abroad in Italy or France. And there were 12,638 more students studying in Italy than in France. Find the number of U.S. students studying abroad in Italy and France. Okay. Now, when it says find the number of U.S. students studying abroad in Italy and France, it's meaning individually. How many were in Italy and how many were in France? Because they already gave us the total, right? They said during this school year, 47,058 U.S. students studied abroad, right? So we already know this is our total. And in order to get a total, we're adding Italy plus France to get a total, right? Italy plus France is going to equal the total number of students we have studying abroad. So we need to know something about each of these. It doesn't tell me how many was in Italy. It doesn't tell me how many was in France. The only thing it said is that there were 12,638 more students studying in Italy than in France. So Italy has more students, right? It's bigger. So I'm just going to write over here, Italy and France. Okay, we know Italy's bigger, it had more students, right? But it doesn't say, it just says there was 12,638 more than France, but we don't know anything about France, right? So I'm just going to label France as an F, okay? And since Italy had 12,638 more students than France, then when you see more, that means we're adding. So however many France had, Italy had 12,638 more. So however many France had plus 12,638 more. Does that make sense? So we can write Italy's in terms of France's because it was that much more than France. So like if I had $2 and you have $5 more than me, you would have $7, right? Because I have 2, that's your base point, and then you add the 5 more that you have to figure out how many you have. Same idea here. France has F students. Italy has 12,638 more than France. Okay. So now that we have an algebraic representation for both populations of students, now we can fill in our equation. So Italy is the same thing as F plus 12,638 plus how many students are in France, which we're just calling F, right? And that's going to equal the total number of students we have studying abroad, which is 47,058. And now this is a nice little equation that we should be able to go ahead and solve. So we combine our F's like they're like terms. 2F plus 12,638 is equal to 47,058. Then we move our 12,000 to the other side by subtracting. So we're going to minus 12,638 from both sides, which is going to leave us with 2F is equal to 34,420. And then we divide off our 2 to get F by itself. So that means that F equals 17,210. Okay, so we're going to stop for just a minute and make sure we know what we just solved for and what that means in terms of our problem. So F represented France, right? So 17,210 is the number of students studying abroad in France. So I'm just going to write students in France. Okay, but if you notice, our problem says we want to find the number of U.S. students studying in Italy and in France. So we only have half of our answer here, right? So now that we know how many are in France, to figure out how many are in Italy, we can do one of two things. We can either just plug it in here. We know that Italy had 12,638 more than France, so we can take our answer for France and add to it. Or, since we know the total number of students, we can take that total number and subtract the 17,210 to figure out how many is left in Italy. Okay, either way works. I'm going to go ahead and just subtract it. I'm going to do 47,058 and subtract the answer we got for France, which is 17,210, which leaves us with 29,848 students to be studying abroad in Italy. Okay, everybody kind of okay on that one? Let's look at the next one. The next one is talking about interest, and the way that we calculate simple interest is equal to principal times rate times time. So in order to calculate the interest, we need to know the principal amount, which is how much was put into that account or how much was in that loan. We need to know the rate as a decimal, and we need to know the time that it's spent in that account. Okay, so let's go ahead and read the problem and see what we're dealing with here. It says, Demarion's 2 student loans total $28,000. One loan is at 5% simple interest, and the other is at 3% simple interest. After 1 year, Demarion owes $1,040 in interest. What is the amount of each loan? Okay, so for each loan, we are accruing interest, right? So we have this loan, right, plus this loan, and then we're going to have to owe total interest, right, when we pay it off, interest. So what we need to know is fill out what we know, okay? So we know that the first loan was 5% simple interest, and the second one was 3% simple interest, right? We also know that it was a 1-year time frame, and we know how much he owes in interest. So this is what's going to go over here. He owes $1,040 total, okay? But I still need to know how much interest was in this account and how much interest was in this account. And remember, our formula here says interest is equal to principal times rate times time. So for each of these, I need to know the principal amount, I need to know the rate, and I need to know how much time it's spent in that account, okay? So how much was put into the 5%? It does not say, right? It also doesn't say how much was put into the 3%. All we know is that his loans total $28,000. So that means his principal, I can't spell, principal amount plus his principal amount should equal $28,000, right? So however much he put in this one plus however much he put in that one should be 28. But we don't know how much he put in here, right? If I told you he put 20,000 in this one, then how much would be left over to be put in this one? If he spent 20,000 or he borrowed $20,000 in this loan, and we know that $28,000 was borrowed, we could easily determine that 8,000 must be in here, right? Because we just take away whatever we invested in the second one from our total, and that's how much we have left. But we don't know that 20,000 was invested in this one, right? We don't know how much. So that's what we're going to call our variable. We're going to say X number of dollars was invested, or not invested, was borrowed in this loan, right? So how much is left to be borrowed in this loan? Well, just like if we thought that was 20,000, we would do 28,000 minus the 20,000 to determine that 8,000 was used here. So if it's just X amount, then we would do 28,000 minus that X amount to figure out how much was in this one. So this is going to be 28,000 minus X is how much is invested, I keep saying invested, is borrowed in this loan, okay? Then we need to know our rate for each loan. My rate at 5%, we write as a decimal, so 5% as a decimal is 0.05. 3% as a decimal is 0.03. And the time that we have left this money in the loan, it says that we're looking at after 1 year. So our time is 1 year. Okay, so we have everything we need to know. We have the interest from this account plus the interest from this account is equal to our total interest. So I'm just going to write it out over here. So to calculate this interest, I do principal times rate times time. So I'm doing x times 0.05 times 1 plus my interest from this account. So I do 28,000 minus x times 0.03 times 1. 28,000 minus x times 0.03 times 1 is equal to the interest that we owe, which is 1,040. Okay, and now this is something I should be able to simplify this and just solve for x. So x times 0.05 times 1 is just 0.05x plus, on this one, I'm going to go ahead and simplify the 0.03 times 1 because that's just 0.03, and then I can distribute it into this quantity. So I'm going to say 0.03 times 28,000 minus x is equal to 1040. Okay. So now on this step, I want to go ahead and distribute my 0.03. So that gives me 0.05x plus, when I multiply 28,000 times 0.03, that gives me 840. And then 0.03 times negative x is negative 0.03x. It's equal to 1040. Now I can combine my two x terms. So 0.05 minus 0.03 is 0.02x plus 840 is equal to 1040. And now I can solve for x, right? I move my constant term to the other side by subtracting. So I subtract 840. So I get 0.02x is equal to 200, right? And then I want to divide off my 0.02. So that leaves me with x is equal to 10,000, okay? So let's go back and see what it is we just solved for and what it is that the problem's asking us. So we found x to be 10,000. So if I go back over to my picture, x was representing how much money I took out in this first loan. So that means that I borrowed $10,000 at 5%, right? And then if I want to determine how much was left, how much I how much I borrowed at the 3%, then all I have to do is take the total 28,000 and subtract how much was invested here, which now we know is 10,000. So 28,000 minus 10,000 leaves me with 18,000 that was invested at the 3%. So those are my answers. Okay. So again, if I were to give you this on like a final exam, I would give you the little formula that, I would give you this hint that interest equals principal times rate times time. But you would be responsible for being able to figure out the interest from the first account, the interest from the second account, and knowing that you need to add those in order for it to equal your total interest. Okay, let's look at a couple more. This one's talking about airplane speed, and it says Delta Airlines fleet includes the B737-800s, each with a cruising speed of 517 miles per hour, and a Saab 340Bs, each with a cruising speed of 290 miles per hour. Suppose that the Saab 340B takes off and travels at its cruising speed. 1 hour later, a B737-800 takes off and follows the same route, traveling at its cruising speed. How long will it take the B737-800 to overtake the Saab 340B? Let's look at that again. Okay, so first of all, we're talking about two different types of aircraft, right? So we have the B737-800s. I'm just going to call this the B plane, just to make it a little bit easier. Okay, and then we also have the Saab 340B. So I'm just going to call this the S plane. Okay, so we have the B plane and we have the S plane, and we only know one thing about each one, and that's their cruising speed, right? So the B plane cruises at 517 miles per hour, while the S plane cruises at 290 miles per hour. Okay, so then they tell us, suppose that the S plane takes off at its cruising speed. All right, so here's the airport, and we have the S plane that takes off at its cruising speed, right? And its cruising speed is 290 miles per hour. Okay. Then it says 1 hour later, the B plane takes off and follows the same route. So now we have the B plane taking off, following the same route, and he is going 517 miles per hour. Okay. It says how long. Okay, so first of all, how long means we're looking for a time. Looking for time. Okay. How long will it take the B plane to overtake the S plane? Okay. So let's think about this. Notice it gives us this hint that distance equals rate times time. So we should be looking for some type of distance. Each plane has a distance. And when we think about that moment when it overtakes the other plane. So overtakes means I have this plane that started off traveling, right? And then I have my second plane that started off traveling. And at the moment that that second plane catches up to, right, catches up to the first plane, at that moment, what I know about their distances is that when this guy catches up, at that second, their distances are the same, right? So that's what I'm going to use to make this equation. Because if I know the S plane distance and I know the B plane distance, right? Notice at that moment when he catches him, the S plane's distance is the same as the B plane's distance. So I can just set those equal. So distance for each plane is rate times time. So in order to come up with these two distances, I need to know the rate and the time of each plane. Well, I know the rate of each plane, but I don't necessarily have the time. The only thing they told me about the time is that 1 hour later, the B plane left. Okay, so the S plane has been traveling the longest, right? He's been traveling, let's just say he's been traveling for T hours. Okay, so if he's been traveling for T hours and this guy started an hour later, that means he's been traveling 1 hour less than the S plane, right? So if the S plane has been traveling for T hours, then the B plane has been traveling for T minus 1 hours. Does that make sense? Because he started an hour later, so his time is going to be an hour less or an hour smaller, right? Okay, so now that I know a rate and a time for each plane, I can write their distance, right? The S plane's distance is going to be its rate, which is 290, times its time, which is T. And the B's distance is going to be his rate, which is 517, times his time, which is T minus 1. So that's all I'm going to do is set those two distances equal to each other, and now I should be able to solve this. So 290 times T is just 290T. 517 times T is 517T. 517 times -1 is -517. And then I need to get my T terms together. So I'm going to subtract 517T from both sides, which gives me -227T is equal to -517. And then I need to divide off that coefficient on the T. So I'm going to divide both sides by 227, which gives me T is equal to 2.2775 and some more stuff, right? Doesn't come out pretty. My math lab will tell you how to round it. For our purposes here, I'm just going to round it to 1 decimal place. So I'm going to say that T is equal to 2.3 hours, okay? So first of all, we need to figure out which time is this. This is the time of which plane, and is that what the problem asked me? So T represents the S plane, right? So what this means is that it's going to take the S plane will have traveled for 2.3 hours when the B plane catches up to it. Okay, so let's see if that's what it wanted. It says, how long will it take the B plane to overtake the S plane? So we're looking for the B plane's time. So this one is the S plane's time, right? So if we know that the S plane has been traveling for 2.3 hours, right, that's its time, then this time of the B plane would be 1 hour less, right? So we're just going to say the B plane's time is t minus 1. So I take what I got for t, which is 2.3, and I subtract 1. So that tells me that it's going to take him 1.3 hours to catch up to the S plane, okay? So really quickly, I want to mention your problem might ask for different things. It may ask, how long will the S plane have traveled before the B plane catches up to it? In which case, this would be our answer. If it asks, how long will it take the second plane to catch up to the first plane? Then this is our answer. Or it may say, how far from the airport, how far will it overtake it? So if it asks how far or at what distance, then we would be looking for this distance, okay? If we're looking for distance, and because the distances are the same, it doesn't matter if I use the S distance or the B distance. It's just once we get an answer for T, we would have to plug that back in to figure out what that actual distance is, right? Because distance equals rate times time. All right, I want to show you one more problem type, and then I'll have you try some problems. So this one is talking about solar panels. It says, in December 2009, a solar energy farm was completed at the Denver International Airport. More than 9,200 rectangular solar panels were installed. A solar panel or voltaic panel converts sunlight into energy. The length of the panel is 13.6 inches, less than twice the width, and the perimeter is 207.4 inches. Find the length and the width of one individual solar panel. Okay, so some words stood out to me. One, we're finding the length and the width of a solar panel. And they also told me that these are rectangular solar panels, right? So if it's rectangular, that means that we have a width, a length, a width, a length, right? So the next thing that stood out to me was the word perimeter, okay? It says the perimeter is 207.4 inches. So remember, perimeter is equal to all sides added together, right? So in other words, perimeter is equal to L plus W plus W. Or we can combine like terms and just say perimeter is 2L plus 2W, right? And they told us what the perimeter is. It's 207.4 inches. So I can put that in. But if I have 207.4 inches is equal to 2L plus 2W, I can't really solve this for L or W, right? If I solve it for L, it's going to have a W in the answer. If I solve it for W, it's going to have an L in the answer. So I'm really hoping to get an equation that just has L's or that just has W's. So there has to be some relationship between the two, right? So let's look and see what it gave us. It told us that the length, so we're talking about the length here, the length is 13 inches less than twice the width. So less than means we're subtracting, right? Twice means we're multiplying it by 2. So it's 13.6 inches less than twice the width. So we're going to do twice the width, which we can write as 2W. And then we know it's 13.6 inches less than that. So minus 13.6. So why does this help? This helps because now that we know what L is equivalent to in terms of W, I can replace the L in my equation here. So I'm just going to rewrite this as 207.4 is equal to 2 times L, but instead of writing an L, I'm going to write in 2W minus 13.6 plus 2W. And why this helps me is because now I have one equation that only has W's. So I can solve this for W to figure out what the width is, and then once I know the width, I can plug that back in right here to figure out the length, Okay, so let's go ahead and simplify. So we have 207.4 is equal to, when I distribute my 2, I should get 4W minus 27.2 plus 2W. Then I can combine my 2W terms. So 207.4 is equal to 6W minus 27.2. And then I move my constant term to the other side. So I'm going to add 27.2, which gives me 234.6 is equal to 6W. And then the last thing I have to do is divide off my 6. And I ran out of room. So W is equal to 39.1. All right, so that's telling me about the width. That means that my width is 39.1 inches. So that's one of my answers. But remember, it also asked me for the length. And the length, we know that the length is equal to 2W minus 13.6. So now all I have to do is put in what we found W to be, which was 39.1, and then simplify. So 2 times 39.1 gives me 78.2 minus 13.6. So that means that my length is 64.6 inches. Okay. All right, so on the next couple of pages, there are 3, I believe, for y'all to try. So go ahead and give those a try. If you get stuck, if you need help, or if you get through them and just need to check yourself, go ahead and unpause the video and we'll help you through or see how you did. All right, so let's go ahead and look at them. Number 1 was an airplane distance problem like the one I did. Okay, so this one says a private airplane leaves Midway Airport, flies due east at a speed of 180 kilometers per hour. 2 hours later, a jet leaves Midway and flies due east at the same speed, or at a speed of 900 kilometers per hour. How far from the airport will the jet overtake a private, or will the jet overtake the private jet? So we have a private jet and we have a regular jet. The private jet leaves first, right? And he's traveling 180 kilometers per hour. The jet leaves 2 hours later and is traveling at 900. So to me, I would say that the first one who left was traveling for T hours. The one that left after is going to be T minus 2 because he started 2 hours later. So the distance of my private airplane is 180 T because we do the rate times the time. The distance of my jet is 900 times T minus 2, right? Because again, rate times time. At that moment when it catches him, our distances are equal. So I just set 180 T equal to 900 times T minus 2. When you solve all that down, you should get T equal to 2.5. So what this is giving us is the answer for the time that the private airline took, right? So let's go back and look and see what it's asking us for. It wants to know how far from the airport did this happen. So if you went ahead and plugged in your 2.5 into the jet time and figured out he's been traveling for 1.5 hours, that's great. But it's not necessary, right? Because it's not asking us for the time of the private airline. It's also not asking us for the jet time. What it's asking us for is the distance that they caught up to each other. So I could use this distance formula for the private airline, or I could use this distance for the jet. It doesn't matter. But either way, I'm going to take what I got for T and plug it into one of these distances so I can see how far it went. And I'm just going to use the 180 times T. So our private airline traveled for 180 kilometers per hour for 2.5 hours, which means that the jet caught up to him when they were 450 kilometers from the airport. Does that make sense? Okay, so make sure you know what it's asking you so you don't stop when you get an answer, because that may not be the answer needed. Okay. All right. The next one was talking about a soccer field, and it says the width of the soccer field recommended for players under the age of 12 is 35 yards less than the length. So this time we're talking about the width, right? Not the length. The width is 35 yards less than the length. So that means we can write our width as L minus 35. Okay, again, they're giving us the perimeter of the field, which is 330. We know that our perimeter is equal to 2 of our widths plus 2 of our lengths. And now that we can write our width as as L minus 35, we just substitute that in for W. And now we can work out this equation to find out that our length is 100. Once we know what our length is, then we can plug it back in up here to figure out what our W or what our width is. So our length should be 100 yards, our width should be 65 yards. If you need to spend more time on these, go ahead and pause the video so you can process it. I'm going to go ahead and move on to number 3. Number 3 was about angle measures, okay? And I forgot to type it on here. Meh. Okay, so you might have missed a crucial bit of information, which is that the angle measures of any triangle when added together equal 180. Excuse me, so that means if we do A plus B plus C, it should equal 180, right? It told us that the angle of measure B was 4 times the angle of A, so we could write that angle as 4A. And then it told us that the angle of C is 1 less than 5 times the size of angle A. So we can write C as 5A minus 1. And then A, we're just going to leave as A. So when we add up A plus B plus C and substitute in these algebraic statements, A is A, B is 4A, C is 5A minus 1. Now we have an equation with just A's that we can solve. So I drop my parentheses, combine all my A's, which gives me 10A minus 1. And from there, we should be able to solve to figure out what A is. And then we just plug that back in to figure out what B and C are. Okay, so that is the end of section 1.5. You should now be able to complete that assignment in my math lab. If you get stuck, have any problems, whatever, just holler at me. I'm happy to help.